I'm Dave Albrechtha. This is Lawyers as Healers, where I explore how lawyers are becoming healers of human conflict. All right, welcome back to Lawyers as Healers. I'm really excited to be joined today by Nanci Smith. Nanci's an attorney licensed to practice in Vermont and New York. She's the author of Untangling Your Marriage, A Guide to Collaborative Divorce. And I'll just note the tagline of your firm, which is promoting peaceful divorce practices. And really excited to talk to you today about kind of shifting the mindset from lawyer as a warrior to lawyer as healer or facilitator, and how that fits into this bigger discussion. So, Nanci, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so I'd love to just start and hear about, briefly your journey through law. We all have our own origin stories and how we came to this profession. So would just love a quick snapshot of, how you got into this work and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. Well, yeah, I love the origin story. So for me, I was called into the law. I was about 7, and this is so obnoxious, but I wanted to be a judge. I thought I
Yeah.
knew like right from wrong, and I was like involved in playground politics, and I just thought, I don't know what I thought I was going to be capable of. And I came home and I told my parents about it, and they said, "Well, you have to be a lawyer first." And I just said, "Well, fine, then I will." And that was just my guiding North Star throughout my entire childhood. And I didn't worry about what I studied philosophy in college because I didn't really worry. I knew eventually I would be a lawyer. And so I did. I studied what I wanted to, and I knew eventually I'd get to law school. I ended up at Vermont Law School, which was not where I thought I would be. I was living in San Francisco at the time. But they sent me a brochure, and it just looked so nice, and the architecture appealed to me. And I had never lived in the Northeast. I was born in Detroit and then moved to San Francisco and then went to college in San Diego. So I was kind of a California girl, and I just said, I think I need a break. And so I came out to Vermont and I went to law school and met my husband, from whom I am now divorced. And we just kind of made Vermont our life instead of that time in our life that we look back on fondly and think, wasn't that great? And that was the logic to keep me in Vermont. I never thought I'd, stay here, but it's just beautiful the way life works out. So.
Indeed. Yeah. And after you got out of law school, did you work at other firms? How did you get to opening your own practice? I just always interested to hear how people end up in that space.
Sure. So my family is pretty entrepreneurial. My dad has always been self-employed. So that spirit was strong in me. And
yeah,
I don't know, maybe I have authority issues or something. It's hard for me to work for others. So I did my stint though. I do believe that the law is it's an apprenticeship, and you need to attach yourself to somebody competent and skillful and ethical to learn the craft. And so I was able to do that. It was, what was it, 1992 when I first graduated law school, and there were really no jobs available. I did a little stint as a lobbyist and realized I hated that. And then found a job in a law firm, and they were a general practice firm. And it was like one of the bigger ones in Vermont, which means that there were like 5 lawyers. And we just did a little bit of everything. So I was trained, one of my partners, they were just really skillful, honorable professionals, and they took me under their wing and really taught me everything that I needed. And then I went to another firm, a different litigation firm, that I thought would give me maybe a little more trial experience, jury trials. I love being in court. I liked it. And then I went to legal aid because of course I got burnt out by all that trial work. It only took 2 years, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I need a baby. I think I need to have a baby and excuse myself from this crazy world that I just put myself into. And then I went back to legal aid and I found my spirit again, and that was great. And then I went back to my original firm for about a year and a half, and then realized, you know what, I had a small child at that point, and I said, I can do this on my own, I think, without having to be in an office. We didn't have COVID yet. We didn't have remote work. When I suggested it, it fell sort of on deaf ears, and it seemed like, how could you actually work at home and make a lasagna and do laundry at the same time you're writing a Supreme Court brief? I'm like, I don't know, but I think I could do that.
Yeah.
but they weren't convinced.
Nice.
So it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So a solo practice is
Very
born.
good. Yes, indeed. And so it sounds like you've practiced in a number of areas. I wonder what drew you to family law and divorce work.
Yeah, so that was completely unexpected, but just part of the bread and butter of what people did in Vermont. So yeah, I thought I was going to be a human rights lawyer. I thought I'd go to Europe and work, at The Hague or do something in international human rights. And then I stayed in Vermont because my boyfriend, future husband at the time, wanted to stay, and I'm like, okay. So I took whatever job I could, and we just did we did criminal and civil litigation. And I was never a fan of doing title searches and going into the vaults and with I would just start sneezing, I think, in those old musty rooms, and so I
Yeah.
was never well suited to that. I had precision work of
Yeah.
doing surveys and land deals. And I actually have a master's in environmental law, and I thought I was going to do that too. I thought maybe doing like CERCLA litigation or, doing something in hazardous and toxic waste. And there were really no jobs, certainly
Uh,
not representing the people. It was maybe representing some polluters in Vermont, and there were not that many jobs. So I wasn't going to be destined to that work. And the divorce work, I had done my first one as a clinician at the Vermont legal clinic and started doing some domestic violence work. And I found that to be really satisfying because I could be in court, I could be supportive, I could be an advocate, I could help protect, people from abusive situations and help them get out of unhealthy, dangerous marriages that they got themselves into. And, at the time I'm 25, I had never been married, I didn't have kids. And then I just started doing more divorce work because it felt heavy and it felt constitutional. And, you have a constitutional right to relate to your children free from unwarranted governmental interference. And the issues felt profound and significant. And I could also be in court, which I liked. So the problem, of course, is I probably liked it too much. And then I, realized that I don't think I'm serving people. Somebody one day called me a barracuda, like she spat at me. I was representing the children in the case. I'd been assigned by the court to represent the kids. And at first I thought I was kind of proud of that. I'm like, oh, she thinks I'm a barracuda. And I'm like, wait. And then I drove home to the office and I thought, do I really want to be, known as a wild animal? Like, is that my identity now? Am I really proud of that? I don't know. I started thinking about it, and literally it was that day that
yeah.
an email came in that talked about collaborative divorce. And then I'm like, huh, maybe there's something
Yeah.
else to this. Like maybe there's another way. So that was in 2005.
Yeah.
So it was a long time ago, but yeah, there's those moments in your practice where you think, huh, I don't know that I'm serving the people in the same way that I really thought I intended to.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think many of us, at least many of the people I'm talking to in this context, have those stories. I won't say many of us overall, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you kind of foreshadowed where I wanted to go in that I'm just wonder, it's clear from your website and from your book title and everything else that you're practicing in a non-traditional or non-conventional way. And that story is one of them. But I always like ask people kind of what led them to question or rethink the traditional system and how things are done and always been done. And it sounds like that was one of them. I wonder if there are anything else you can point to.
Yes. Well, there was that day, during COVID when we were doing all of our trials, online. And I just had one of those moments where I was representing a man in a relief from abuse case. And if, in my opinion, if he had been a woman, there would be it was not a close case. He would have gotten a restraining order. He probably would have had criminal charges pressed up, against him. But in this case, because he was the, the victim of that, the court said something that just set me off. It was just, the court just said, this is a close case. And I'm like, what? And, we know we're taught not to believe whatever, believe too strongly in the merits of our own arguments or
Right.
our clients' cases. But I really thought this was not actually a close call at all. And then what it dawned on me is that I can't work like this anymore because I don't feel like there's logic. and I don't feel like there's a heart center to it. So
Mm,
I was straddling both worlds for, since 2005 until 2021, where I would do collaborative cases and I was trying to build that and build it through Vermont as an alternative way to get people divorced. And I was also in litigation. So it was a bit tough to hold both those mindsets, but I thought I was doing okay with it. And I would justify being in court because I thought at least it's logical. But that particular case,
mm,
under those circumstances, just made me say, it's not actually. Like, I can't trust the logic of the system anymore. Like, I can't tell my client with any predictability what's actually going to happen.
yeah.
And that kind of freaked me out. And I'm like, well, it's not heart centered, which is why I do the collaborative stuff. And it's not logical, which is why I was justifying doing the litigation stuff. So I just said, I'm out. I'm just going to tap out and focus on doing what I actually am interested in doing and helping people in a different way. And then I have been nothing but happy since I haven't
Yeah.
had to go back to court.
Ah, that's awesome. That is so well said and seen. I have a case I talk about a lot that made me question things too. And it was the same thing. It was this completely illogical outcome. And I haven't really thought about it in that way in terms of the predictability of it. And that was a big piece of what was troubling to me was that here I'm supposed to be advising my clients based on what and obviously we can't predict things with guarantees, but we should have a general idea of where stuff's going. And when it goes in a direction that's off the charts, it's hard to um, send shockwaves through your system. You know?
It really does. It really does.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, and so tell maybe you could tell for anyone that's listening that doesn't know what collaborative law is. And I think there's might be minor differences depending on jurisdictions and states, but what's been your experience of how collaborative law works?
Sure. Well, generally, it's considered it's an alternative form of dispute resolution. It's recognized in every state in the country. It's fully legal, fully ethical. And what I generally define it by under the terms of the International Academy of Collaborative Professionals that requires a participation agreement. It is a interdisciplinary process. So there's two lawyers, a mental health coach, at least one, maybe two, and a financial neutral. And as a team, the professionals create a container basically to help the clients transition through from the very beginning of like, I want a divorce. And the other one's like, where is this coming from? And we kind of manage all the intense emotions, just all the fear and the anxiety and the regret and the betrayal and the rage and this like permeate, like this sense of nausea. Like it's temporary, but it feels permanent. And people just feel like they had the proverbial, rug pulled out from under them, or they're spinning, or they're, feeling like they've been kicked in the stomach. Like there are so many visceral reactions to somebody saying that they want a divorce. So we temper all that and we just normalize it. And then as part of our process, we say, look, we're going to roll up our sleeves and come together, sit and try to work things out together professionally with integrity based on core values like transparency and mutual respect, compassion, and which are not typical in the divorce world. And we're going to do it different. And we're not going to take advantage of mistakes. And we're also not going to go to court. We're not going to hold anything back as lawyers and say, well, we're going to have full transparency and mutual respect for our colleagues and the clients. And so we're not going to do some of the adversarial things that we've been taught to do. We're not going to hold something back because we can use it later. There's no gotcha moments. If somebody makes a mistake, we just correct it. Like no shame, no blame. Let's just like help people move through the transition. And then we don't get the second bite at the apple. So if this fails, like if we don't choose well or the clients are not well suited to the process and the process has to terminate, then the lawyers cannot go to court. And that's the big deal about it. The lawyers cannot go back to court with the clients because then you're like double dipping. Like you're saying
Yeah,
that you're going to try to negotiate in good faith and engage in, facilitative conversations. But at the end of the day, you're going to be like, well, if it doesn't work, I can just get the judge to make a decision. And
right.
so this creates the incentive for everybody to stay together.
Yeah. It's such an amazing model, and I love hearing people talk about it. I done practice family law, and I was always, I don't know, I hear about the collaborative practice, I'm like, oh man, that would have been really cool. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about like why that hasn't bled over into any other practice areas. Because I looked into it. I've practiced employment law, and it's employment law is a very ripe area for it because it's very similar to a divorce. It's the separation. I mean, we literally call them separation agreements, and we're not allowed to. I mean, they're actually we are not allowed to enter into an agreement that says the lawyers won't go to court under our ethical rules. And I'm just curious why, if you have thoughts as a collaborative practitioner about why it hasn't caught on in other areas where it feels like it should.
That's so interesting. I'm curious about the ethical limits. Is that Colorado specific?
Yeah, it is.
Interesting.
Yep.
So I don't know. Like originally, well, I'm I'm baffled that collaborative divorce hasn't actually caught on. Like
Right,
people
right.
still don't even know about it, and that's why I wrote the book. I'm like, people need to know that this is an option. But because most divorce lawyers don't practice it because they don't want to make that paradigm shift and it's hard, they think that they're going to lose something. But in fact, I wish they would understand that you gain so much more than what you think you're losing, which is really just your identity and who you think you are when you play litigation lawyer person.
Yeah,
But
right.
but for whatever reason, people are very attached to that. So why it's not going into other fields? Like originally, it was going to be maybe useful in guardianship cases and probate cases where there was
Yeah.
court as an option, and maybe elder care disputes and things like that. But I don't know why it wouldn't be well suited to. I wonder what do they say? What are they worried about? Do you think?
I know. Yeah, that's what I wonder too. I mean, there's, it, and this has been a couple of years since I looked at it, but when they created the collaborative, there's a section of I think it's in ethical rules for collaborative practice in Colorado, and it says this may not be used outside of family law. Like you cannot use these rules. And I suppose there might be ways around that. And certainly you can't restrict people to contract and agree to whatever they want to, but there seem to be some limitations that were suggesting from the Supreme Court and the committee that put those together. This ought not be used anywhere else.
That's so interesting. It
Yeah,
could have been part of the way that, I mean, that sounds like a very strong lobbying effort by
yeah,
the trial
right.
lawyers. And
Yeah,
then maybe that was the only way that they could get the UC, what do they call it? The Uniform Collaborative Law Act passed
right.
in Colorado, because we haven't passed it in Vermont. But I think that's just so curious because you could still get out of it. It's a voluntary process and there's a 30-day waiting window. So if it doesn't work, you can always go to court. Like you're not giving up
Yeah,
your right to ever go to court again if you really, really want to.
that's right.
But the
Yeah,
lawyers are not going to be the same ones. And so there's a price to
yeah,
that. And maybe people are trying to look
true.
out for the clients that they don't want to have them. Although aren't most employment cases contingency based anyways?
Yeah,
So
yep.
I don't see
So
how it could just be
I
like
know.
that larger resistance to change concept that
Yeah, yeah. I think that's probably right. I want to loop back to something you just said about the resistance to accept these things and the lawyers who feel like they're giving something up by adopting these practices. I love this topic and I think it's so important to talk about. So I'd love to hear from you your perspective on that because I imagine you had some of those initial feelings too when you were going through that transition. So go ahead.
yeah, for sure. No, I love this
Yeah.
topic too. I think identity is really important. It's, and
Yeah.
I want to say that I've always felt because I was called into the law and I had really, really great mentors, especially my litigation mentor when I went really deep dived into trial work. Like he taught me like being a lawyer it's a noble profession. Like it actually is. But sometimes we don't act that way. So that's, I think, where the challenge is. The profession on its own is noble. We're trying to serve, and we're trying to serve justice within the rule of law. And it's a major important role in society. So I believe that, and I love lawyers, and I like them in all their different variations for all the different things that they do. It's also just like a super conservative profession. And so change comes so slow. And when an idea comes around like collaborative or, non-adversarial like how can we work in a non-adversarial way? I feel like ego and identity are very up at the front, and you got to be tough to be a trial lawyer and put yourself out there
Mm,
and talk, on behalf of other people in front of a jury and pick a jury and do it all. Like it requires, a certain personality, and like mine, I'm very outgoing that way in some ways, and I liked it. And so I feel like I understand why lawyers don't want to give it up, because there's something satisfying about it. Like you've done your job, you've learned your skill, your craft, you do it well, you get paid well most of the time, although sometimes you get stuck with the bill and you can work madly and not get paid. So that's pretty frustrating. But it's that identity thing. How attached are you? And how I was thinking about that this morning. Like you got to know yourself. Insight is very important. And maybe that's because I'm a philosopher at heart, but I've always thought that like you need to know yourself and not play games and just do what ultimately feels right for you. But sometimes I think people don't spend a lot of time thinking about themselves. They don't do a lot of introspection or therapy or think about the big questions of life. They may have gotten into it for various other reasons and they're not into that.
yeah.
That was what I have to come to terms with. Like some people are just not gonna, they're just not gonna understand what I'm talking about, and that's
Right.
okay. And I can't get annoyed at
Yeah.
them, and I'm not gonna bang my head up against the window trying to convince them that that the all the family lawyers in the world should be practicing collaborative. Like, yes, I think that, but if they don't want to, and they are not secure enough to ask themselves, how could I be wrong? Or how could more minds at the table actually result in a better outcome for my client? How can I trust somebody? I think that's a lot of it too. Like we're taught we don't trust anybody. Like we don't
Yeah.
trust our adversaries. You cannot turn your back on an adversary. Like art of war number one, right? Like don't turn your back and look for your opportunities and strike when you can. Like it's all very aggressive that way. And it's just a different way of approaching life and conflict. And I think people are so uncomfortable with conflict on so many levels that sometimes it just seems like fighting or getting mad. It's just the easiest outcome. It's like the easiest way to go. Low hanging fruit, actually, which of course the trial lawyers would be like, what? No,
Uh-huh.
but
Yes.
it actually is. I think it's much harder to do the kind of work that we're doing, slowing down, not being such a bossy boss, and listening to others, listening to understand, not to educate and pontificate and tell everybody how smart you are.
Yeah.
That requires a sense of security in your own ego and your own sense of identity and how you want to move through this world, which ultimately I think is like a spiritual question.
Yeah. Absolutely. Spiritual, metaphysical. I yeah. There's so many things, so many directions to go from all of that. And I I I think you touched on a few things that I, trust really stood out to me. This, that my experience, I litigated for 10 years. And by the end of it, there's a few examples I can point to that just utterly destroyed my trust in other lawyers. And it's one of the reasons I got out of it is because I didn't want to be living that way. I want to trust people. I want to believe that people are telling me the truth and that I can trust what people are telling me. Um, and I don't want to be naive about it, but I also don't want to live in constant state of fear where I think everybody's out to get me, which is how litigation felt.
Yeah.
And that feeling alone creates so much stress and pressure because a couple of things you've pointed to, like the mistakes. You slip up once, and in litigation, there's no forgiveness. It's very unforgiving. And when you start thinking about how that impacts lawyers' just general state of being, that we're then in constant states of fight, flight, or freeze and stress because the world is a threat to us and our client, it then leads to us not being able to be collaborative because you can't trust. And It's so interesting how and then like you say how much identity is tied up in all of that. It's quite a complex knot to unravel.
Totally is, which is why I love that you're having these conversations and thinking about it and bringing it out to the forefront because this is it. Like this is the crux of it
Yeah.
all. And I really appreciate, and it does, it makes you sad that somehow the culture, the legal profession made me feel, like I'm being naive if I want to trust my opponent. Like I'm not naive. Like I'm from Detroit. I'm tough. I can roll with the best of you, but that doesn't mean that you should be lying to me or like gaslighting me. It happened.
Yeah.
I had a case where I made a mistake and it wasn't a collaborative one. It was not that long ago. And against my better judgment, I took a case that I knew the lawyer and we would work it out. But working it
Yeah.
out after a year and a half of just stress and worry and knowing that you're not in a safe environment, it was awful and I'm not going to do it again. But I made a mistake. I called her. I said, hey, I made a mistake. She wouldn't take my phone calls for a while. Then I finally wrote an email. Then I wrote an email explaining exactly what happened and where the problem was. And literally, she tried to gaslight me and tell me I didn't make a mistake. I'm like, no, no, no. No, no, no. You don't get to take
Yeah.
advantage of that. Like, that's not cool. And
Yeah.
it's just not the way to roll with integrity at this stage of our lives. But
Yeah.
it's hard, and you can't be creative and you can't be curious if you're in that state of
Yes.
flight or fret, flight or fight. And the adversarial nature of it is you're chronically in a fight. Like it's a brawl. Like
Yeah.
you're in it. Like don't
Yeah.
pretend you're not, because then you will get kind of slapped upside the head sometime. And
Yeah. Oh, you get taken advantage of. I mean, I spent a little bit of time. I trans as I was deciding didn't want to litigate anymore and thinking about where to go and tried some different approaches. And again, these you go up against a big defense firm. They don't give a shit, and they see that language and they just jump all over it. And it's a dog eat dog world out there.
it is. It really is. And
Yeah.
and then and when it's a criminal case, okay, like
Yeah.
you need that. You need your
That's right.
battle armor on and you're defending, precious rights against the power of the state. Like go all in.
Right.
And then even just like civil advocacy without all the weird gamesmanship and we all know jurors don't like that. Like they don't like that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they end up, I don't know what the research says about that, whether they actually end up siding. I mean, I think jurors just follow the law. They try their best to follow the law. But they don't like the antics. I mean, we've heard that anecdotally. They don't like antics of lawyers being all trying to be too clever or constantly objecting in the middle of somebody's, arguments or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know. So yeah, sometimes I feel like maybe we do have to just take ourselves outside of that and find different ways. And our people exist. Like your podcast is out here. People are listening to it. I found it. It's, there's so many people, innovators that have been out there that are doing the work of peacemakers. And it's been around for a long time. Like it's not well publicized and they don't talk
No,
about it
that's
in
right.
law school, right? Like there definitely was no law and spirituality class when I was, applying,
Yes.
but or law, even laws of lawyers of peacemaker. But there are actually some scholarly articles that have been written back in the like 50s and stuff, where
Yeah.
other people like us were thinking about this, and I think that led to the innovators and the early adopters of collaborative, Stu Webb and Pauline Tesler and
Right.
Jacinta Gallant up in Canada. And I remember talking to Jacinta one day, and I'm like, I cast my lot with the innovators. Like, that's what I want to be with
Yeah.
them. Like, I want to be with interesting people who are doing cool work, who are helping and moving the profession forward in a supportive, healthy way, not in a demeaning, reductive kind of way.
Yeah. Yeah, and great segue because it's easy to get caught up in all the negative sides of our profession and all the things that aren't going well, which we all know about. The challenging question and the thing I've been thinking a lot about, and I think those of us that are thinking about this stuff spend a lot of time thinking about, which is, all right, like what's the solution? Where do we go from here? And collaborative law is just a fantastic real world example of a almost like an adjacent system is how I've been starting to think about it. Like the litigation system needs to be there. It's got to be there for good reason. But is there a way that we can have something that's adjacent to that or a precursor to that that allows people to explore this stuff before escalating all the way to trial? I just wonder your thoughts about that and what yeah, I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think it is an adjacent process. And some people just can't make a shift. So some of the lawyers in the profession are just not going to. So that's okay. They don't have to. Like we can, and there will be enough of us, and there's enough clients around. It, it's very self-selecting. So I think you just have to have trust and faith that your people are out there for you, and they
Yeah.
want to try different things. But it's not for everybody. And the, Canada has a really interesting thing about collaborative. So it requires every divorce lawyer in Canada to explain the different options, specifically including collaborative divorce as an option.
Wow.
So the lawyers, even if you're a litigation lawyer, you'd have to tell your client in your initial intake that you could do it yourself, you could go to mediation, you could do collaborative divorce, and you could litigate and explain what all those are. And
That's
what's
amazing.
Yeah, I know. But I think what's tricky is that litigators, I think, don't really know about collaborative because they haven't practiced it. And so they might
Yeah.
kind of poo poo it or say that it's woo woo or whatever kind of things that they
Right.
say. Kumbaya, we're all going to sit around, you know,
Yes.
and that's not true at all. Like these are really hard cases. These people come with very complex family system dynamics and problems, whether it's addiction or you know, mental health issues or just grief. Grief
Yeah.
looks like all of that. You don't even have to have
Yes.
an actual diagnostic label. You could just be sad and grieving the loss of your marriage and the relationship and half of your wealth and half the time with your family and the loss of the dream that you thought you were building. Like there's plenty to work with here with
Yeah.
just
Right.
grief.
Yes.
So like how to get people to understand that from my point of view, divorce is more of a grieving process. It's legal, it's financial, and it's emotional. It's all three. And so if you had a system that incorporated lawyers when you need the lawyers, which is not at the beginning of a divorce. You don't need the
Yes.
lawyers at the beginning. You need the mental health coach to kind of settle down your intense emotional overload and normalize all those feelings because they just come so fast and furious and nobody wants it. Nobody ever wants to be divorced, and nobody wants to lose their job. And your sense of identity and who you think you are. And some people don't want to be forced to change so quickly. And so having some system process that will address the legal needs, but also address the human needs, I think is critical.
Yeah.
It's critical. And most people I don't think want, I don't know. I don't know if most people do or don't anymore because I don't engage too much with that part of the world anymore that wants to be in constant conflict and war. Like I am just choosing to avert my eye to that. Like I know it exists and I'm not being naive that it doesn't exist. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just saying I don't want to do that. Like I don't want
Yeah.
to I have a small niche in my practice of law where I can help people move through the transition of divorce with some degree of grace and dignity. Like that's what I'm interested in doing. If you're not interested in that, then there's several other people you could call.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
And maybe I won't work like a dog, and maybe I'm not working as crazy hours like I used to, and I'm not, and I don't want to. So maybe I'll have less, but my quality of life is better, and my peace of mind is better, and my central nervous system isn't on spastic overdrive because I'm worried about, you know, my adversary making me look stupid or something.
Right. Right. Yeah. There's a couple things. One is that that what you said about grief, I have to imagine applies to any area where you're representing an individual. I think it applies to companies and organizations too, but like particularly potent for if an individual is going to a lawyer, it's 9 times out of 10, it's because they've lost something aside from business planning or, the estate planning, whatever. But personal injury, employment, any of these areas are because something has been lost. And the system, this goes to your point earlier, which is a constant theme in these discussions. I always label it as doing hard work versus working hard, uh, and that distinction. And it's much easier to work hard than it is to do the hard work of introspection and reflection and having difficult conversations and sitting in conflict and being uncomfortable, all those things. And so I think you're right. This is just my own opinion that most people don't want to be in conflict. I'm tempted to say no one wants to be in conflict. There are people that are attracted to it and engage in it a lot, but I don't think it's because they like it. I think there's something else going on that leads them down that path. And to me, the problem with the system right now, which the Canada thing really addresses well, is people come into a lawyer grieving, angry, vengeful, all the emotions are firing, and they call lawyers first, and lawyers say, well, here's the option. There's one thing to do. We're going to sue them. And that like scratches this primal itch of like, I'm angry and I want to lash out at somebody, but it's not aligned with like who they are as a human being in terms of wanting a peaceful life, which I
Right.
think everybody wants.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's cool to think about that. It's one solution is just like we need to make sure everyone gets all the options right up front.
Yeah.
How you do that's a different question.
Right. Right.
uh,
It's
yeah,
so interesting. Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think people don't want conflict and people don't know how to manage it well. And we're not taught how to handle strong
yeah,
emotions in the culture. We're super repressed and it doesn't feel good. Nobody likes to feel, all your, especially in divorce work. I mean, all your family of origin stuff comes up, all your
yeah,
abandonment issues, your attachment issues, like all your stuff just starts flooding out.
yes,
And you do not want to underestimate the impact of rejection on the human spirit. And I think that applies to
mm,
the employment world too, because you feel rejected. And when that happens, you are hurt. I
yeah,
mean, all the literature, the psychiatric literature shows that your limbic system lights up in the same place when you are rejected. Even if somebody just turns their head to you or gives you a look or whatever, if you feel rejected, it's as if your hand has been in a door. Like it's the same
yeah,
thing. And
yeah,
it just keeps repeating and it's public and it just feels so shameful. And so how do you not try to deal with that stuff before you just say, oh, I'll sign you up and we'll file a complaint. I'll have it done in 2 weeks and off we go.
I know.
And I was thinking about this too. I think one of your earlier podcasts talked about apologies and the power of apologies. And they are so important. They can be so pivotal, especially in these kind of more intimate conversations where somebody has the courage to actually admit that they did something wrong. And I tell a story in my book. I was divorced from my husband from law school, and it was like 6 or 7 years later, and we were both at a legal conference, and the topic was apologies and the law. And I'm like, that sounds great. And I'm like, and then I get there and I see my ex, and I'm like, oh, he's gonna learn something. Like he must be willing to, ready to apologize or something by the time this thing's over. Of course, that did not happen. But what we did learn was that risk assessment folks from hospitals know that if their doctor does malpractice and they come right out and they just say, I am so sorry, I made a mistake, the families are less likely to sue. And as opposed to the one who just comes out all arrogant, like, oh, I don't know, and passing the buck and blaming the nurse or whatever, and saying that
Yeah,
they didn't do anything wrong. And that cover up, that hiding, the not being authentic, people, especially people who've been wounded and hurt by somebody else's actions, negligence or intentional, they need to hear some remorse, like they really do. And then it just humanizes it. And and ironically, it saves you, the the perpetrator, saves them time or money or whatever, damages. People are less likely to
yeah,
sue. You can reach a more reasonable settlement and you don't go to court and you're not having this public display and it doesn't take 6 years or 10 years or 3 years or hundreds of thousands of
no,
dollars and energy. That's just not when all they really wanted was just to be seen as a human
that's right.
suffering.
So spot on. And yeah, and I like all these parallels between employment law. I mean, I will often have, if a business owner finds out the work I did, a lot of times they'll be like, what do I do to not get sued? Like, how do I avoid this stuff? And I'm like, nobody ever called me employee called me and said, "Hey, this happened. I want to know my rights." And by the way, they treated me so well on the way out, and they said thank you, and they, said sorry for what happened. And I never heard that. It's always, they ignored me and they kicked me out the door, and there was no thank you and no acknowledgement, and so it's the same thing. You just humanize it and be a good person, and people don't have these reactions, and the system isn't needed for that. And it's interesting because when I have these conversations, we're all on the same page in terms of, you're talking about the profession being noble, which I completely agree with, and like the importance of a strong justice system to prevent government overreach and protect our individual right, the things that it's like really there for, and but it's expanded into this realm of personal conflict in a way that is fine because sometimes it's needed. But the fact that lawyers are who people call first when they're experiencing this stuff, to me, is like one of the biggest parts of the problem, that we need to re-educate the public to say, like, hey, there's other professionals out there that should be your first call before you start talking to a lawyer, or a lawyer who's trained in these other things and is approaching it differently,
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. I think, and better training in the law schools
Yes.
about what
Yeah.
our identities are. And I remember thinking about that, like writing ethics opinions or writing ethics articles or whatever, essays, papers, just about thinking about that, like being taught. I remember this. I don't know if you did. I'm curious. Like, I just had the sense that they were changing me. Like, the system, the law school education system was trying to change me from
Yes.
Nanci as a human to Nanci as a lawyer. And that lawyer and Nanci as the human were not the same.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it was such a
Yeah.
split in like your personality. And I remember writing an ethical piece about it. I'm like, I tried to argue against it, but like, I want to be the same person. Like, I don't think that's a good strategy. Like, what's going to happen to me? Like, the
Yeah.
better parts of myself, you're going to make me into this. And then I'm going to do what? Like, I don't know, just
Yeah.
contribute to more hostility, more fighting, less love, less peace. Like, I wanted to be a lawyer because I wanted, peace, world peace.
Yeah.
How am I contributing to world peace when I'm going to court every day and just engaging in the madness of, especially for me, once I realized that I'm not doing heavy constitutional, I mean, I am, the family work is constitutional, but it's not criminal. And I didn't want to do criminal work, which I love everybody who does the work, but I couldn't do that. I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to just fight about money. So I didn't want to just do business disputes. I'm like, are you kidding? We're going to do a jury trial about that?
I
That just bored
I
me.
know.
So I like the humanity. I like being connected to humanity. And I think the lawyers that do that kind of work and that we're drawn to it, that we ought to be encouraged to really bring our better selves to the process and not feel ashamed, like somehow we're less than. Like, if we're not going to do it that way, if we're not going to be litigators, like somehow we're less than, like they're the top
Yeah.
dogs.
Yes.
And they,
Yes.
they create that image of themselves. And I liked it. Like, I liked it. I'm not going to lie. I liked it. But then I didn't. And I realized that's not that it's one aspect, but it can't be all of me. And sometimes I'm afraid that a lot of people just don't take the time, and we know this from like the studies about the lack of wellness in the profession. I mean, I remember
Yeah.
doing a research thing about it 5 or 6 years ago, that big Hazelton study, like highest incidence of suicide, highest incidence of addiction issues, mental health, burnout, the whole business, like unsatisfied, like worse than
Yeah.
dentists. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Where, like,
I
we rank
know.
worse in like job satisfaction than dentists. I'm like, that's
I
not
know.
good. That's not good.
No. And there's equal studies about what you just talked about, which is that law school does cut off these parts of us, our ways of thinking about conflict and resolution. There's really interesting studies about, testing law students before law school or in their first year and then after they graduate, and their idea of what a satisfactory resolution is to a conflict completely changes. And so it's no surprise, it shouldn't be a surprise then that there's burnout, suicide, all these things, because we're literally, you're right. I mean, you're like bifurcating yourself, and so you're automatically living in misalignment, and that you can only do that for so long before it catches up with you in one of those ways, At least those of us who are looking and questioning it.
Yeah,
I think if you're numb to it and don't look at it, you might last longer, but so interesting.
it is. It's just great to be having the conversations and have it
Yeah.
out. I appreciate and applaud your sort of courage to just have the conversations out there and reorient us. Yeah, it's good. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, you keep getting ahead of me. I was going to say the same thing about you. And I was going to, I know how much courage it takes to walk away from litigation. I mean, for all those reasons you just said, it really gets into your system and your identity. It's kind of like a drug. I mean, and I experienced it, and it was really hard for me to it took me months to just say, I don't litigate. I don't go to court. I don't go to, and I took a lot of therapy just to say that out loud, even though I knew I didn't want to, which was just a signal of how enmeshed it was in my identity. So I wonder if you could talk about any thoughts, advice for people that might be in that space, that are questioning this, that know it's not right, but are having trouble walking away. It takes a lot of courage to do it. And so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thanks. Yeah. So I would say, so about 7 years ago, I went to a vocational consultant because I'm like, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I've been doing this for, at that point, 20 years. I'm like, I should do something else. And so I spent all this time and money and I did all this really interesting deep diving into vocational opportunities. At the end of the day, it was like 6 months of exercise and work and money. She says, well, you're perfectly well suited to do exactly what you're doing. I'm like, what? I'm like, no, that can't be true. No, no, no. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, crap. And so I said, well, now what? And she's like, well, is there any aspect of it that you like, that you love still? And I'm like, maybe the collaborative. And she's like, well, why don't you focus on that? I'm like, okay. And so I just went
Yeah.
away like so sad and humbled and like annoyed that now at this stage of my life, all I'm well suited to do is being like a trial lawyer of divorces. I'm like, that's it. And
Yeah.
so then I said, okay, let me focus on what I actually really am interested in doing. And then I had that bad day in court after COVID and the loss of, like, I just saw clearly no humanity, like no heart, no logic. I don't belong. So I
Yeah.
think when you have that moment, if somebody's out there listening and they're like, I think I'm having moments like that, I think stop, notice, honor it, take a deep breath and know that it's okay. Like actually that's like your higher self being like, I'm
Mhm.
going to save you from years of like,
Yeah.
just from going down a path that is not going to serve you or humanity in the long run. So it's actually like a beautiful gift that you're getting if you get that download that this maybe is not for you anymore. And I totally understand. Like I felt powerful, and I know my colleagues feel powerful, and it's status, and you're well paid, and you've got a nice reputation, and people call you, and people need you, and they think they need you to go to court for them, but they don't even understand that that's not actually what they need. They need a mental health professional, like first and
Yeah.
foremost, and they got to work through their grief and their losses and then decide what they really want for themselves. And I think as professionals, doing that deep dive also, like know yourself. Like if you're not feeling it, it's a good sign. Like let it go and do something else. And there's so many ways to serve, like there really are. And I think now, I don't know, like in my moments where I'm like, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I'm like, I could be a baker. I could go work. But then I'm like, no, I can't work for somebody. And then they're going to expect me to be there at 2 a.m. And what if after a week or two, I don't want to do it anymore?
Yes. Yeah.
So, I think, so for me, I'm just kind of working my way into, and I've been doing this for 36 years now. And
Yeah.
And I like being of service. What I really love are my consultations. I like it when somebody calls
Yeah.
confused as, confused AF and not knowing what to do. And I can be like, take a deep breath. Like in 90 minutes, you're going to feel like you have options. In 90, right now, you do not feel like you have any options. You don't see any. It's dark. And I understand that. But you can lift your eyes up over the horizon a little bit and there's light and liberation at the other end of this. And it doesn't have to be such a horrible, painful experience. It really can be quite liberating.
Yeah.
But it takes courage to do that. And I think for the lawyers who are in it, working for big law or firms or family firms, and there's just so much pressure to conform.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, do you want to conform or do you not want to conform? And I think at some point, like I said, I cast my lot with the innovators. I just think they're more interesting.
Yeah. Well, I love the, view it as a beautiful gift and pause and accept it, let it in, listen to what's coming up. So often we just push it away. So that's great. And yeah, there's something you said in there about, yeah, this idea of, just it always keeps coming back to me to one of the motivating factors for me in starting this and having the conversation with people is that I worry that the good ones are getting away, right? Like the lawyers who ask those questions accept it as a gift, who question things and say I can't do this anymore, and they get out and go do something else. So often, like your story, are the ones that are best suited to be lawyers, even more so than the people that are putting on the suit and playing the role and going through the motions. And so it's like we need a place for those people to land where they're still doing the work but can do it with ease and joy and grace and
Yeah.
maybe even some fun,
Absolutely. You got to have some humor
you
in
know.
it. You got to have some humor in it.
Yeah.
And colleagues, like I think
Yeah.
finding more
Right.
people, like I was thinking when you were speaking, yeah, that's true. Like you don't want the good ones to leave the profession where then all that's left is,
Exactly.
right, people who are following orders and not really following their hearts and thinking about their
Yes.
hearts. That
Yes.
is that looks like it could be a real risk. And also creating space within the profession for those of us who want to do it differently. And like going to places, like I used to love going to these conferences, these collaborative divorce conferences. There were like 200 people in the room, and they're like all cool, nice people, like
Yeah.
lawyers and mental health professionals and financial neutrals. And
Amazing.
I went by myself. I'd go to some of these things. I'd go to Philadelphia to a conference by myself, and like the entire Connecticut table would like let me sit with them, and then the Texas people would
Yeah.
invite me to have drinks, and people were just so nice and so open-hearted and doing and excited and enthusiastic about the like of just getting collaborative out there. And then
Yeah.
but it's still so many people don't know about it, and still it's like a secret, and still most divorce lawyers won't talk to you about it, and you almost have to hear about it some other way before you
Right.
can find out if somebody could understand where you're coming from, that you don't want to go to court. Like nobody wants a bad divorce. Like if you give them that option, people will choose, like no, is there a way to do it in a way that we don't ruin everything and ruin each other and hate each other? Like you declared your love and devotion to each other in front of God and all your friends and family, and now you're going to be like, I hate this person, I never want to deal with them
I
again.
know.
Like no,
I
let's
know.
not do it that way.
Yes, I know. Yeah, totally. And there's yeah, there's the I have this vision of that we have more of like a solicitor barrister type system where there's a group of non-adversarial, there's a bar, like a separate bar, and there's separate training and a whole different law school experience if you want to be the entry point for people in conflict, and that you're, as a client, you're required to go through one of those people first, and if that doesn't work out, then you call the litigators and you go there. That's like my dream vision, but
I like it. I like
Took
it.
a long time to get there.
Right? Well, maybe the court system itself, sometimes in family court, they used to try various things, but now there's no money. They say there's no money.
Yeah,
I don't know how that's possible
right.
that the legislature doesn't adequately fund another arm of government, and now the judiciary just sits there and takes it,
I know. Yeah,
which is
totally.
very frustrating. But like they had a lot of interesting pilot projects back in the day where they would have
Yeah,
panels of people that would come in and listen and
yeah,
help clients. And because the pro se people, like most people don't even have lawyers anymore. Like
right. That's right.
people don't
Yeah,
want anything to do with us. So
I know.
they may have like super large estates and high net worth, and they are like, we're just going to do this ourselves.
Yeah. Well, that gets to this bigger point of like shooting ourselves in the foot when we were talking about the people that are scared of the risks of doing it in a collaborative way. The risks of not doing it and doing it the way we're doing it now is that people just stop. They just don't want anything to do with you because they've heard the horror stories and they don't want to get lawyers involved. And that to me, the long-term business plan of someone going out and talking to all their friends of like, man, hired a lawyer and it was like I transformed and I had this growth experience and I've learned so much about myself and about conflict and it was amazing. And like if people are out there saying that about us, the long-term business looks a lot better than people leaving and being like, what the hell was that? My life got destroyed. I don't know what just happened. I don't know what I spent my money on, the usual stuff.
Yeah,
It seems so obvious to
I
me.
know. I know. I don't know what's going to happen. And with AI and everything, like
I
everybody's going to
know.
be out of business unless you find your humanity. But like,
That's right. I know.
so, and people are going to be in conflict and accidents
Yeah,
happen and
totally.
people hurt each other. And the
Yeah,
question is, do you want to heal? Like, do you want to
yeah,
heal? And
that's right.
if,
And that's why to me, it really, in talking with people like you that are doing this work, it just really feels like two different breeds. It's like two different species. I mean, like we all know great trial lawyers who absolutely love it and are above board and do everything and have integrity and are great at their jobs. And we need those people, and they're vital to democracy. To at the risk of being too dramatic
no,
about it, I
it's
mean
not.
they
They
are
are.
they're
They are.
vital,
Yes.
and we need them, but there's also this new breed that's emerging and they need a space too, and the two ought to coexist, and I think they only help each other. And yeah, so
Yeah. May we all not need
anyways,
trialers at some point. I mean, like, you have
yeah,
to, if you need them, you need them. And obviously, thank God
totally.
they're there.
Yes,
But ideally, like, let's try not to get there. Like, let's,
that's right. And like you said earlier, it should not be the starting point. That's not the starting point.
no, it's such a big ammunition for a heart that's wounded ultimately.
Yes,
Like, you don't need that.
yeah,
And that there's always that idea that people want to be heard. So
yes,
I find that in so many cases, it's like they're not heard in the marriage. They're not heard. So they think that by telling their story to a judge is somehow going to get them that their day in court is going to
yeah.
be some satisfying experience. And it's just not. Like, I just wish they
I
knew
know,
that, I mean, we joke that, you know, from the court's point of view, you both should walk away unhappy. And then the court thinks that they did
I
a good
know,
job.
I know.
So no one's, and then somehow they think that they're going to get what they want and they don't even know what they want because it's not about the things. It's never about the things. But that's why
That's right.
you need to know yourself and realize that. But
Yes,
until you do, talking to other lawyers that don't understand that, talking to clients who are not capable of understanding that, it requires a certain amount of insight. And I'm hoping that more people in the world understand that. They want that. They're craving that. They're listening to your podcast. It's just a beautiful thing to see next generation lawyers asking these questions, having these meaningful conversations about identity and trust and who you want to be and what's important to you and how are you going to serve, because it's all about service at the end of the day.
yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, well, we could talk for hours more. I didn't tell you I'm also a philosophy major, so we could go on and on. But I want to ask you if you have a couple more minutes.
Sure.
There's a couple quick questions I like to squeeze in at the end. One is just very briefly, like when you hear the title "lawyers as healers," when you hear that phrase, I like asking people what comes up for them. What's your what is good or bad? What does that kind of bring out for you?
Yeah, I love it. I had first kind of heard that Kim LJ,
Yeah.
yeah, Kim,
Kim Wright.
Kim
Yeah.
Wright.
Yep.
That was the first kind of that I really started. I met her, I talked with her. She's a beautiful human
Yep.
being, and her books are great.
Yes.
It just, for me, it's just this nice salve on like the wound of
Mm-hmm.
humanity. It's like, just
Yeah.
put something softer on it. Like, don't just rip it apart. Like, it might be almost healing, and you're going to come in as a litigator and just rip it right off,
Yeah.
and just the blood's
Yes.
going everywhere. So I see it as like this salve on the conflict, and it just makes me like want to participate as a healer,
Yes.
not, because it sounds almost, it's kind of arrogant. It's like, oh, lawyers, healer. It might be a little arrogant because like we're not trained to be healers, but at some point in our humanity, like we're all healers. Like we have all of the gifts to live a consistent, congruous, authentic life of depth and caring for others. And so we have all that within us. And so I think lawyers being able to help people find that within themselves is a real gift, and not
Mm.
just defaulting to a system of warrior tactics and, Lao Tzu.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. And then uh, that I really appreciate that. And then last question for you is what these days, what's giving you hope about the future of the legal system? I like to end on a positive note.
Yeah, yeah. I think
Yeah.
I think more people like you, honestly, and having conversations about this, and just people wanting something different. Like I know people want collaborative. Like they come to me. I have people call me every week, and they read my website. They've heard about it. They know it's not me explaining myself over and over again, like what it is. People are coming prepared, which for me tells me that the work is being done over the last 30 years. Like this takes time. Like it has been 30 years since collaborative practice has been around, and it's been evolving, and it's just a slow, steady, seeping into the culture. And these things do take time, right? Like back in the day, people would say about mediation, they'd say medication,
Yeah. Right.
meditation. What are you talking about?
Meditation. Yeah.
Right? Like they didn't know
Yeah.
what mediation was. And so now everybody knows what mediation is now. And so I feel
Yeah.
like I'm hopeful that down the road, at least in my space, and maybe hopefully it can move into other spaces, because there should be no reason why this doesn't apply to employment, because of the similarities of the loss and the rejection and the nature of the relationships, because people spend so much of their life in work and their identity is there, and they spend so much of their time there, and to be summarily removed is a devastating experience, from an emotional point of view. So yeah, I feel like my hope is that more people understand that there are these options, and they're choosing them, and that the clients will choose who they choose as their lawyer. And then I think, I've always said this, and in my book I say it, I think once the public knows that there are these options, the other lawyers will come on board, because they're going to lose market share.
Yeah. That's right. Yep.
So they're going to
I
shift
know.
eventually when they stop having clients, because most clients
Yes.
are not going to want that experience. And if they know that
I
there's
know.
alternatives, and there's enough, lawyers that are willing to engage in the non-adversarial dispute resolution processes, I think the other lawyers will come along. But maybe
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. All we can do is hope.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, Nanci, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
for joining me and having this conversation. We talked offline before, but I really would like to have you come back and do kind of a deep dive on the nuts and bolts of your collaborative practice and dive more into that. So we'll set that up. For people listening, I do have an interview with Kim Wright coming up, which I'm really excited about. So that's forthcoming. And lastly, before we go, if anyone's interested in reaching out to you about the work you're doing, where can they find you? How can they get in touch?
Sure. Thanks. Nanci, Nanci, SmithLaw.com, NanciSmithLaw.com. And then just feel free to reach out, and yeah, check out the website. There's videos and blogs and all kinds of stuff. And yeah, I would be delighted to come back and talk again. And I also want to share stories about our overlanding expeditions, because
Yes,
that
I
is
know.
that is in our
We might have
futures.
to.
Woo,
I know we might have to start another podcast for that.
that sounds fun. That sounds fun.
All
All
right.
right. Well, be safe and
Well,
have fun.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll catch everyone next time.